たった一つの字間違えただけの全部書き直さなくちゃいけなくて、それでもう3時間かかってて。
Welcome to the Lazy Fluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Yami.
And the topic of the day is job interviews. Before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and drop a review on the platform you're listening on. And if you feel so inclined, support us on Ko-Fi. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, job interviews. As many listeners might know, working in Japan can be pretty stressful. Japan is a great place to visit, but not to live, is a sentiment I hear quite frequently as a result of Japan's work culture. But something that isn't talked about as much is the application process to get a job and how that can suck even more than having a job in the first place. Today we are talking about job interviews because
私は今いわゆる就活中でございまして、医学部の就活と、あと普通の大学の就活は、ちょっと違うとは思うんだけど、大体一緒で、今それをしてる最中でもう最近ずっとずっと curse words ばっか言ってるよね。every time もう私が間違えた時とかうわーってなった時にもういろんな言葉が飛び交うからもうねすごくストレスフルでね大変なのよ。はい。
Yeah, there is obviously some comparison you want to do between, there's some stuff that American system have, but the amount of rules that are in the Japanese system, and this does depend on what kind of field you're in, but generally speaking, the system is the system across all jobs. And well, I guess we can start with the one that has been driving you the most insane. There's a bunch of stuff that we'll get into, but the thing has been driving you the most insane recently is what? The thing that's been driving you crazy?
その履歴書とあと願書っていうやつで、履歴書っていうのは今までこのどこの高校を卒業して、どこの大学卒業しますよっていうのをいろいろ書くやつで、願書っていうのは会社だったらね、その会社をに応募する理由であったり、あと自分のいいところ、短所とあと悪いところ、いいところは長所ね。で、悪いところは短所って言うんだけど、それを書いたり、自己 PR ね、書いたりとかするのが、願書。で、いろいろあるわけですよ。はい。
The 履歴書 would be closer to, in at least the American system, your resume. Gansho would be your application specifically for whatever job you want. But one of the key differences between, at least my experience, and I think it's getting even more and more this way, and resumes are becoming way less important depending on the field. Even going to undergrad is becoming way less important, just generally speaking across America. But for most of these things, some people think, are you going to say that, if you have a typo, it's going to be a problem resume? That's the same thing in America, whatever. In America, you can, I don't know if a job that make you do it written by hand, and in Japanese it is by hand, and in the US, I have no experience I've ever had has required me writing anything. So you have autocorrect on you can read it over multiple times. If you make a mistake, you can correct it by hand. But not only is writing both your gansho, your basically your why you want to go or do whatever job you're doing, and your rirexho, your resume, which is way more intrusive, by the way. It's way more intrusive information we'll talk about in terms of what they add. Not only is it by hand, but it's by hand to an insane degree. I mean, do you want to explain?
Oh, jeez. いや、もう数日前かなに、ある病院の、願書、履歴書を書いてたわけです。で、履歴書、じゃあ先に願書書いてたのかなで、願書書いてますと。で、その願書を書いてる途中で、なんだっけな。そうだ。履歴書か。ごめんなさい。履歴書で、高校を何年卒業して、大学を何年卒業するっていうのを、書くわけね。で、私は、なんていうの？何年生まれだと、高校何年に卒業して大学何年に卒業するっていう自動で計算してくれるやつをウェブで探してそれを見てたわけよ。で見ながら書いてたのね。で私は2000年生まれだから 2000年って打って、で、ずらーっと出てくるわけよ。で、高校、2016年に入学して、2019年に卒業したんだっつって、ずっと書いてたわけよね。でですよ。で、大学の欄も書くわけじゃん。で、ちなみになんか西暦と令和何年で書かないといけなかったんだけど、西暦は書けたわけ。で、なんか、違うわ。西暦を間違えたんかな。で、何年って書いたときに、なんか、最後チェックしてるとき、これがなんか4年生大学の年号を書いてたの気づいて、私6年生の大学だからね、メッドスクールって6年だから、それでもう最後の最後で気づいて全部書いてたわけよ。短所長所、あと死亡理由とかなんかいろいろね。だからもうそれ最後に気づいた時に、もうこの世の終わりだなと思って。で、なんだ、自己 PR とか短所長所全部書いてたやつは、もうそれもそれでなんか G 間違えたりとか、たった一つの G 間違えただけの全部書き直さなくちゃいけなくて、それでもう3時間かかってて、で、その最後の卒業何年っていうやつ間違えて、また書き直しじゃん。だから多分、4時間ぐらい合計でかかっちゃってて、もうこれはやってられんなと思って、もう、なんか、ね、ずっとなんかファックみたいに言ってたよね。
Well, I think something that you're taking for granted that some people might be thinking is, Aimi, you're writing it by hand. Why don't you just erase the mistake? Basically, Aimi wrote a 5 instead of a 7. That was the mistake. She should have wrote a 7, should have wrote a 5. Imagine writing, so just for people like, imagine writing your college essay, the one that you're applying to, as well as by hand writing out your entire resume, and then you wrote a 5 instead of a 7. You might be thinking, Aimi, why don't you just erase it and then write the other number? Aimi, why can you not erase the mistake you made?
それがね、なんか日本の就活のマナーというものがありまして、でそこでは誤字脱字、間違えたら消したりしちゃいけなくて、でしかもerasable pen ってあるじゃん。フリクション。
Oh, but you should probably specify one thing. You're not writing in pencil. So that's what I was trying to get you to say.
そう、ボールペンで書かないといけないのね。で、ボールペンで書けばいいんだと思ってさ、消せるペンって世の中に存在してるわけだから、それ使えばいいじゃんってなるけど、それを使ってはいけないんよ。
Yeah, it's explicitly banned to use pens that can be erased. Well, I mean, why don't you use what's it called? Whiteout or something.
で、修正テープとか修正液とかなんか白いやつあるじゃん。白くて上からさ、なぞれば白くなるやつ。あれは使ってはいけないんよ。それもなんか、なんていうの？マナー的によろしくないっていうからしくて、いや、そういうルールを作ってる方がうちらに対して失礼じゃねとか思う。だってさ、3時間もさ、書き直してさ、で、結局読むのは10分ぐらいなんでしょって考えてさ、なんかもう、何がしたいのかわからない。
Well, I mean, for one, you still weren't done with that because you realized you made another mistake on the back, right? And had to redo the whole thing again.
何したっけ
？What was the mistake? You wrote, so high schools in Japan are referred to as koukō by pretty much everybody at all times. But specifically, this is actually a good specific thing here. I do want to mention, so you might be thinking, maybe in English, I can imagine myself writing without making a single mistake, which good on you. But you have to keep in mind, Japanese is kanji. And when I say mistake, I don't just mean being technically correct. I mean, it has to be pretty. So if one of your characters looks ugly, which, that's up to a bunch of people, but, Japanese people kind of have a vibe of what something looks ugly, rewrite the entire thing. So I don't know if you think about your handwriting, but it's not just that there was a moment where, with her current issue, where, so she was, normally people refer to schools as koukō, but when you're referring to them like formally, it's koto gakko.
Yeah. That is... なんかバカだよね。もうなんかさ、高校、だって普段さ、みんな、どこ高校出身とか言うじゃん。でも書くときは、高等学校っていうのが公式で、高校は、なんとか高等学校って書かなくちゃいけないよ。で、私、もうなんかもう、もう脳が死んだ状態で、なんとかかんとか高校卒業みたいなの書いたのよ。そして、もうなんか、はって気づいて、高等学校だって思って、 で、もうこれも、なんか、またやっちゃったんだけど、なんか、最初に私、その自己 PR とか、死亡理由とか最初に書いちゃってて、だから、そっちの方が長いじゃん。で、そっち書いちゃってたから、もう全部その高校のファッキン高校のせいで、全部書き直し。
I should also mention that for Japan, regardless of what job you're doing in, there's basically no general application. So for colleges, there's sometimes, well, they'll accept like a general, like obviously you can write essays specifically for schools and more competitive ones are like that. But in Japan, it's if you're applying to a job, or in this case, like multiple residence locations, like 8 or 10, can be competitive, you have to write a petition for every single one. And one of Aimi's, or I guess our friends, is in this situation where they're being driven to a hell. Because if you can imagine having, I think Aimi's probably spent 8 hours, or 10 hours on one. Are you done even with?
Yeah. そう、一個は、でもね、一個、先ほど、郵便局に行って、送る手続きをしたんだけど、一個忘れたことあって、なんか死亡理由書とか、願書をコピーして取っといかないといけないのを忘れてて、なんでかっていうと、その面接で、それを、その書いてあること中心に聞かれるから、なんか、と思って、送った後気づいちゃって、やってしまった、みたいな感じ。そう。
Yeah, I do want to talk about some other aspects of the interview process, but the one thing I do want to mention is assume that you've written a perfect, essay. Assume that you've written a perfect resume. Assume that all your characters are beautiful. You can have to read the whole thing for using, as we talked about, the Koto Gaku versus Koko. There's a whole set of ways that you have to refer to the company you're applying to, or in this case, like hospitals. And if you don't use those words, those also qualify you for having to rewrite the whole thing. So instead of saying like for...
rewrite っていうか、なんて言うんだろう、失礼になるみたいな。
Which is the same thing, right? Yeah, and so like, for example, you cannot refer, if you Japanese learners here, if you know where the word kaisha means, business company, you can't use that. Instead, you have to use...
そう、なんか書くときは、
just to be clear, she's saying when you write it, there are two different words. When you're being interviewed, spoken, you have to use a different word, and when you're writing it, you have to use another word, which is both not kaisha. They are.
そう、なんか書くときは記者って言って、貴族の記に、貴重の記に、会社の社で記者なんだけど、その面接とか、話すときは、御社って言わないといけないの。で、これだと英語だと、your companyだけでいいのかな ?Your company inspires me みたいな感じ。
We don't have to, saying your company is so weird. You're speaking to you probably just, like I said, maybe we should go into some of the information that you have to give. Or, man, there's so many different, this is like such a huge topic. We're not going to be able to cover a lot. But at least I obviously am biased because I came from like CS exposure. And where that is basically as casual as possibly gets. It's like, hey, you take this test. If you pass this test, you're good. You can get more involved if there's like multiple steps and then you have to come in-person interview. But something that like just, I guess we could jump into in-person interviews. I have some experience. You're going to be getting some experience, but and by experience, I don't mean just with the US side. I have some experience with slightly doing the Japanese side. But just talk about the US experience so far. It's pretty much all based on all these you can do non-technical interviews, but like most of the ones I've had experienced, you just come in, it's very casual. You can pretty much wear whatever. There's some ones that are more formal, but like at least in CS it's not the case. And then you just have to solve some stuff. And if you can do that, it's cool. And even if you don't, it's not high pressure. It's high pressure in the sense that you want to get to the job, but the environment itself isn't like crazy high pressure. Whereas from what I understand, and from my one experience, and maybe you can talk about more if you know about this, when I did, or maybe I'll throw it to you actually, and then maybe I'll talk about my experiences afterwards.
何が
In terms of the way that your mensetsu are conducted. Are you familiar?
なんかいろいろあるけど、それこそ会社とかね、病院とかによって違うんだけど、あるところは集団面接って言って、
Yes. Yeah.
なんだろう、applicants が、何人、なんか多分数人とかも多分10人ぐらいいるとこもあると思うんだけど、そういうところに、そういういろんな人たちと、一つの部屋に入れられて、なんかディスカッションを、見られてるとか、あとは、面接官がいて、数人で一斉にやるとか、それこそ、あと1対1、3対1とか、いろいろな形があるんだけど、でも聞いたのが、集団の 面接とかで、なんか、どれだけ相手、なんていうの、他の人が回答してるときに、なんか、うなずいたり、いい反応してるかを見られてるらしくて、なんか、あんまり尖ったことを言い過ぎない方がいいし、逆に、と同時に、なんて言うんだろう。あんまり平凡すぎることも言わない方がいいみたいな。なんか難しいんだよね。私もよくわかんないけど、集団面接の練習もしたことないし、私が受けるところは集団面接じゃないからわかんないんだけど。
Yeah, I've heard it compared to basically being a trial, where you're guilty on all charges. You don't know what crime you committed, but you're guilty the second you come into come in. I think 3 people is like the standard from when I was like looking into it. And yeah, you're being evaluated by everybody consistently, and they have the, you might be thinking, well, I'm the one, I don't have as much experience, I'm younger, it totally makes sense that we should at least be one-on-one, which is very common in US interviews, I should mention. But in Japan, they're like, no. We're going to have 3-on-1 because, like, fuck you. And you have to deal with the pressure of like answering them perfectly, and you're being evaluated the whole time. And it's very serious and like tense. I told you, my one experience of this was actually there's 2. One was a little not traditional because it was for a CS company, but the company technically was European in Japan, and that was like pretty casual. It was just me and this other guy, even though he was Japanese. It was like more like Western style. But then my experience that was more close to Japanese one was one of my Japanese professors. It was like who's like whole thing as being like a traditional Japanese professor this is applying for an exchange program, and they did the whole setup. They had a chair in the middle of the room. There's one chair in the middle of this room. There's nothing else. Like all of the chairs are gone except for 3 chairs in front of that one chair in the middle of the room. And you had 3 different professors, and you're answering questions. You obviously have to be dressed up, and we'll talk about dress up etiquette as well. But yeah, I remember that
Wait,
being.
What? So 3 何?
So there's 3 chairs facing one chair. So you have 3 chairs on one side, one chair. Yeah. No. So I'm saying I have done it one time, and yeah.
それ普通じゃないの?
No, why didn't you 普通?
何普通待って。アメリカの
my American interviews experience is you have one guy, and you're just chilling, and like for CS you're by a whiteboard maybe, and then
whiteboard.
You're just, yeah, you're like, hey, how's it going, whatever. It's like, hey, what's it, whatever, and then that's it. It's all one-on-one is super common. You're not having like, I feel like I was about to get the death, or I think I got the death sentence. I was trying to beg to not get killed.
なんかもっとひどいのがあって、私なんかここはアプライしないんだけど、なんか一つの病院があって、なんか10人のお医者さんとなんかなんだっけな、多分看護師とかもいろいろいると思うんだけど、10人以上の面接官と1人だって。で、一人一人からブーボーなんていうの、そのテストみたいな感じで、例えばルーケミアの治療法は何だと思いますかとか、ルーケミアを説明してくださいみたいな。そう白血病ね。とか、なんかそんなのもうさ、プレッシャーに耐えられないじゃん。
Oh, basically, it sounds like you're giving a dissertation. I think that's what like was it 修士?
論文修士論文かな?
修士論文. Yeah. That's actually probably a very good comparison. So, like you're giving a dissertation on a paper that you don't know the details of. They're like, hey, so you wrote this paper here. I didn't write that paper. Well, we're going to test you on it.
しかもさ、なんかもうこのwhole conceptのなんか志望動機、あとなんだ、自分の長所短所とかさ、いろいろ書くプロセスがあるじゃん、願書で。で、これって私も含めて文章がすごく書くの苦手な人って誰かしらに見てもらって添削されるじゃん。だからさ、結局自分の言葉じゃないじゃん。ね。自分の言葉をもとに修正してくれるんだと思うけど、でも丸々自分の言葉じゃないからさ、なんていうの、それって私を評価してるわけじゃなくて、その修正した人のおかげで私を評価してるわけじゃん。だから意味ない。
The thing I don't understand is everything extremely formalized and expected to be a certain way and response to expect to be a certain way. So I'm not entirely sure with like your reason if it's supposed to be anything like personal or not, or that's just another part of the game that you need to respond in a certain expected way.
しかもさ、私は本当に文章を書くの苦手で、なんか本読んでこなかったことが理由だと思うんだけど、そういう人でもさ、文章上以外で、実際の生活で、コミュニケーションが上手い人であったりさ、 性格がいいとかもあるじゃん。だからその文章だけを見てなんか評価されるのがマジで意味がわからないっていうラント。
My problem is the fact that you can't like that you have to write everything by an unerasable pen and even oh, by the way, somebody might be thinking what I'm thinking because I feel like some popular listeners are pretty similar to me in this regard. Joey, you could use ethanol. Why you don't have to use a erasable pen. You can dump your paper in, do the whole I tried for IME's paper. I got paint, nail polish remover. I doused that section. The problem with this method is Japan doesn't make bad pens. They don't. It's not cheap ink. They make
extremely good quality.
and literally the whole when I was looking it up, especially I was like wondering if any Japanese
それ何
people.
trashy pen だと大丈夫なの
Well, it depends. So the thing is, Japan, the ink, the inks that people use, especially the good, there are pens that are specifically used for writing these things. They recommend ones that are basically resistant to everything, like resistant to oils, resistant to water, and then they make
That's
sure
the whole point だけどね。
yeah,
そ
yeah,
のペン
no,
の
but like especially so, and they make sure they
消えないようにするからね。
they go deep into the paper. I was like, I hate this.
しかももうね一番ねすごくねラントしたいことがね夏にこのめちゃくそ暑い夏もう昨日なんか37度だっけ37度ぐらいになったのよ。
99 degrees.
そうで almost feel it feels like 100じゃん。
Yeah.
そうその中でこのくっそ暑い中で真っ黒の長袖長ズボンのスーツを着ないといけないっていうマジもうクソなルールがあるわけですよ。
Oh, I don't know if you mentioned that the Okinawa thing, and maybe it'll come up when we actually go into Okinawa. But one of the reasons this came up when we figured, I mean, I guess we kind of intuitively already knew this, but I realized why so many Japanese people hate the summer is because, if you're any sort of job, you have to wear like full on dress suit, even if it's burning and you're inside a train with a bunch of other people. And there's one prefecture where this is not the case, and that is Okinawa, and where they actually made it a law change that all government officials during the summer basically wear Hawaiian tees, which was something that was taken from I can't remember if it was during the Obama administration. I was seeing a picture. It's not that like long ago.
でもさ、まあそこの病院は別になんて言うんだろう、何っけな、スーツで来なくていいですよか、なんだっけな、スーツで来なくていいですよだって書いてあるんだけど。他の人がスーツを着始めたら私が浮くわけじゃん。私しかスーツ着てないわけだから。だからそういう周りのせいでじゃあスーツ着てない人はなんかルードだってなるわけよ。
Yeah, that's the crabs in a barrel effect. I definitely feel like crabs in a barrel. It's the idea like if a crab is trying to escape a barrel, supposedly the other crabs, will pull it down so that everybody dies together instead of letting like just almost out of spite.
そうね。どこかしらの誰かがねそうするってね。
Oh, I will say that there's something additional. Let's go. So we still haven't covered a whole bunch of stuff like appearance, which hopefully we'll be able to cover a little bit. But on top of all the stress that you might be thinking, a normal job interview, whatever, you make, whatever, it's fine. You can try multiple times. Well, here's the thing. If you don't, skill isn't being tested for most of these job positions. It's not really about skill. I don't think I don't know if we mentioned it, but the reason that IME has to go to a lot of these different hospitals in person is because regardless of your stats, if you don't actually visit a hospital in person, there's basically a 0% chance you're accepted. It's just like a culturally understood thing for residencies that's the case. And then the other thing is for almost all occupations, and I don't think doctors be any different. If you're not a recent graduate who's like signed up and figured something out before you've like graduated officially, like senior going in to, senior college or high school or whatever, and you don't get your job done before that, like your chances of getting into pretty much anything drop dramatically because, as in if you're not like shinstotsu, as in you're not coming in.
まあそうね。なんか理由があったらいいと思うんだよ。なんか例えば今まで会社員で働いてたんだけど、まあ、なんだろう、思い立って医学部入学して、 卒業しましたみたいな。なんかそういう理由があったらいいんだけど、なんだろう、遊びほうけてて、4年間、謎の4年間があるとかだったら、多分理由は聞かれると思うし、なんか、この人真面目じゃないみたいな捉えられてしまう可能性もあるから、なんだろうね、そこもちょっと厳しいかもしれない。
I mean, it's definitely more, there's obviously a similar vein in like, you know, employment in the US, but it's not nearly the same like degree. You're basically like an untouchable, I feel like. When I was able looking at some of the more information surrounding this subject about how important it is to like get something lined up beforehand. That's also why this is like a pretty big topic in most anime, or I think it's some there. I was just watching, I don't want to spoil it or whatever, but a lot of shows will have a big plot point about figuring out your the job, like your course that you want to go into, and that's kind of why. It's like you have 1 year, hey, high schooler, you better figure it out. And also if you mess up during this, then you better be content getting at the bottom of the barrel everything for a long time.
あとなんだろう、そのさっきのなんだっけ、一回その病院とか、まあ会社もそうかなに実際行かないとそもそもなんか採用されないみたいな話あったじゃん。
Yeah.
それをなんかまあ病院の話になっちゃうんだけどね、レジデンシーの話になっちゃうんだけど、なんか結構な人数は行きたい病院はなんか2回とか3回行ってその顔を売るっていうか、私はこれだけ一生懸命なんですよとか、あとなんだろう、顔を覚えてもらって、この子はなんだこれだけ生きてるからなんだろう取りたいなとかなるように何回も行く人結構いるんだけど、なんかすごくなんかバカだなって思っちゃうんだよね。だってさ、そんななんだろうね、その顔を売るためだけにさ、その時間をさなんか潰していくのもさ、なんだろう意味あるのかなって思っちゃって、でそういうなんかルールにしてる病院もあってね、何回以上来ないとそもそも面接しませんよみたいな、確か都内のねどっかの病院がそうなんだよね。だからなんかすごくめんどくさと思って。
Yeah. I'm wondering how this will change is because it's becoming easier to change jobs. We talked about some more, maybe not in enough detail, but you can't like, it's not easy to just like change jobs, apply for another one. Like it's super common in the US for people to do like 1 or 2, 3 years at a job, switch jobs. And in Japan, because of all these expectations, I told you, like it's a whole business. There's literally a whole tenshoku agent and like formal ways to switch
YouTube の
industry.
時ね、広告毎回出てくるよね。
Yeah, no, like just like crazy. And it's because if you could do it on your own, but if you do, they're just going to, you know, be like, hey, there's something needs to be formalized for it to be accepted, basically. Oh, I do want to talk about, do you have appearance? The appearance stuff I found really funny.
Appearance まだ話してない。
Yeah, obviously there's like etiquette and appearance in the US, but once again, I think it's very loose compared to some of what Ami's about to cover.
なんかね、例えばじゃあ男の人はまず髭を剃らないといけない。どう？なんか結構髭生やしてる人いるよね。
Yeah, people are, I think, are aware of that in Japan, but yeah, no beards, no mustaches.
No mustache. だし、髪の毛も染めてもいけない。
Can't dye your hair.
うん。なんか、まあ、なんて言うんだろうね。まあ会社にもよるよ。そのアパレル、なんかクローディングとかの、まあ会社だったら結構おしゃれな人の方がさ、まあ好ましいから、まあそういう、なんていうの、髪の毛染めても OK ってとこもあるけど、大体は地毛に近い色じゃないといけないとか、こういう髪型はいけないとかね。多分アフロとかはダメなんじゃないかな。
That was a whole controversy actually at some point. I
ね、
remember.
そうだよね。多分でも結構人種によってはアフロがもう地毛のところじゃない。地毛の人もいるからさ、なんかじゃあ人種が違えばアフロはいいのかって話になるじゃん。
Well, you had this situation where where your hair is not like black as like Japanese black. And so you've had like a whole having to dye your hair, but you're like, but dyed.
でもさ、最近ちょっと先っぽが結構さ、色戻ってきちゃって、なんかまたなんていうの、ブラックじゃないか、まあダークブラウンにしないといけないのかなみたいな。めんどくさい本当に。まあいや、それはまあ髪の毛の話で、女の人はまあ男の人よりはまあまだなんていうんだろう、ルールは緩いっちゃ緩いけど、でもまあなんだ、髪の毛は長い人はもうまとめないといけないとか、 あと、なんだ
I mean, the general categories in general. There's like suit, makeup rules.
メイクアップもね、ノーメイクもダメなんだよ。
Oh, you can't have no makeup?
そう、だからこれもなんかね、一回
That one I've never actually heard of.
そう、なんか一回ね、なんかコントロバーシーになったんだよね。なんか、
yeah,
その女の、じゃあ男の人はそのメイクアップしなくていいのに、なんで女の人はメイクアップはしないといけないのとか、まあ、しすぎるものも良くないけど、しないのもダメみたいな。なんかすごく性差があるじゃん、それね、だから最近だとね、まあ女の人もなんかパワーを持ってき始めてるから、そういうなんで女の人はしないといけないんだっていう声を上げてる人も多くて。
I remember also there was a controversy about high heels.
ハイヒールね。そう、私さ、すごくハイヒール普段履かない人だから、痛いわけよ。もう、一歩歩くごとに、かかととつま先がもうマジでもう地獄なわけ。で、普段履き慣れてない人が、そう言って、まあ、なんだろう、会社の面接のために、遠くに行った時に、なんかもう、パフォーマンスが落ちるよね、そのヒールのせいで。だからなんで男の人はそうやってヒール履かなくていいのに女の人は履かないといけないの
I think it's now, at least from maybe I'm not sure, but I think flats are now okay in some places because of there was quite a lot of uproar about the whole women have to wear high heel thing. But if you can imagine some sort of specification, it exists and is defined a very specific way. I do remember one of the the very distinct Japanese guy when I went to this fair in Boston. It's called Boston Korea Forum, and they're just a wave of Japanese people. Me, my friend who was just there, and then one in this entire sea who was wearing a silver dress suit. I remember he stuck out like ridiculously. There's a guy with a very like bright blue as well. But it going to one of those in person is like it's crazy. It's like it's like watching a tsunami of just black, white. Like go through, yeah, but yeah, I recommend it as a tourist. If you ever know there's a job fair, Japanese buffer, just look, experience it because it is kind of, it's almost scary. It feels like you're in a Star Wars episode, like all the drones are gonna hit you up. But yeah,
なんか
go ahead.
こういったまあルールがあるわけじゃん。髪の毛の色指定する、髪型指定する、あと着る洋服指定するってなるとさ、もうなんかみんな同じに見えてくるじゃん。ねえ、ここでさ、なんか個性を発揮できない場面でさ、じゃあさて面接でやりますかってなった時に、なんか個性をなんか見抜けないじゃん。ねえ。
Well, I don't think that's the point. I think
インタビューって個性を見抜いてさ、この人が本当に自分の会社、病院に合ってるかをさ見るためのものだと思うんだけど、意味なくない？逆にね、わからなくなっちゃうじゃん、その人の本当の個性が。だってみんなさ、それでなんていうの、猫かぶってスーツとか着てるわけじゃん。
I mean, I think the point is to show that you can not disrupt the harmony. But I'm a harmony. If you want, I'm a harmony disruptor. This is one of the reasons. But I'm
harmony disruptor.
Although I could, I have no real interest in working at a Japanese company. But let us know if you have any experience doing or like thinking about applying to a job or maybe a traditional job in Japan. And also for those, just FYI, who want to work in Japan but don't want to deal with this, just look for like European companies. It's not worth it, in my opinion. It's not. There's so many stories on it. It's not worth it. The writing by hand in application form would kill me alone. I make too many.
Jesus.
But yeah.
And I need to write 2 more.
戻りました。
We're back.
今回、すごく悪いことをしてしまった。
Painful experience.
20キロの経験。
Yeah. So yesterday, yesterday we ran 20 kilometers and the temperature was 37 degrees in Celsius, which is
99度かな、歌詞で。
Yeah. 99. Yeah.
で、
Fahrenheit.
多分このポッドキャストで何回言ったんですけど、その日本の夏はそんなに悪くないと思う。で、まだその意見はなんか一つのことについても変わってないんですけど、問題なのはなんか走ることと普通に生きること、なんか生活することの違いはすごく大きいです。で、その20キロを走りたいと思った時に、その天気完全に確認しなくて。
Yeah, like I knew that it was gonna be like pretty hot, but I didn't care about the like direct sunlight. So basically, I normally only put sunscreen on my face, but yeah, so I didn't put anything on my like arms or like legs.
日焼けしたことないってことかな。
I kind of do, but like I just get a little like brownie tan, like slightly, but just like it would never get like red or like painful. So yesterday I didn't put on my body, and you did?
そう。日焼けしたことがあるから、もちろん茶色の肌、人でも、日焼けできるので、それを分かっているから、外で走ったことはあるから。
Yeah,
で
because
海の時もあるし。
really? Yeah.
で、めっちゃ痛いから、いや、それ、がんの恐れもあるから、それを一応、
yeah.
塗ったん
But yeah,
だ
I
けど。
trusted my Asian skin like
Asian
too
skin？
much.
どういうこと？対応。
Too much.
耐性あるの？
I am pretty how do you say immune to the sunlight compared to the average Japanese people because I'm kind of like tan like normally.
少しだけだけど。
Yeah. But yeah, so I trusted my skin, but the result is pretty bad. Like I want to show like
じゃあ
show? Like, yeah.
ポッドキャストを見てる人なら見えるんですけど、あゆみの肩はかなり
Yeah, like
赤くなった。
Jesus. And it hurts.
痛そう。今でも痛いってこと。
Yeah. Yeah.
そうです。ポッドキャストの時をやっている時でもかなり痛いので、大丈夫？
Yeah, so it was yesterday, and I hoped that it would be a little better today, but like, yeah, it's the same, yeah, compared to yesterday.
で、私に関してはカバンがあったんだけど、走ってる時に、で、普段はカバンをもちろん使わずに、持たずに走れて大丈夫？
Hurts.
ごめんね。で、普通にカバンをもちろん走りながら持たないんだから、重さに全然慣れてなかったし、で、今日起きたら、これ日焼けじゃないんだけど、普通に肩痛いし、で、膝も痛いし、で、
The knees はあれでしょ。20 km でしょ。
で、カバン持ってたから。ってことは、今回のエピソード結構頑張ってるって感じ。めっちゃ疲れてるっていうこともあるんだから。
Yeah. True. And then the funny thing is you went to a meetup kind of event like after running 20 kilometers and then came back like around like
12時
Yeah, 12 a.m. That was brutal for
最悪。
you. Yeah.
楽しかったけど同時に
You were like dying. Yeah, inside.
目を痛かったし、頭痛もあったし、で、肩も痛くて、膝も痛くて、筋肉全体的に痛くて、で、大変だった。で、水を飲むの、唯一の。
Oh yeah, we drank like 3 to 4 liters per person. Yeah, that was, yeah. Like,
でも日本じゃなかったらできなかったこと。なぜかというと、コンビニと自動販売機はなんかいつもあるから、なんかどこに行ってもあるから。
But it was not like that countryside area like we ran. So
そうだけど。
That's why we had a convenience stores and vending machines.
こういうでも日本だとコンクリートなんか英語だと concrete jungle という、言葉があるんだけど、なんか木あまりないんだけど、走ってる時は。アメリカ少なくとも道路はたくさんあると思うんだけど、一応木とかあるし、で、日陰になんか隠れることもできるんだけど、日本の場合だとコンビニあるんだけど、同時に走ってる時は逆にコンクリートの上で、なんか直接、太陽の苦しい
直射日光がね。Yeah. Ah, that was brutal. I have no idea like when I can get to the normal shoulders. like normally like how long does it take to fully like recover from the burn?
あ、その痛みってこと？
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
2日間かな。2日か3日。
2 days?
いや、まあ。
Then I have to like.
ちゃんと塗ってるのであれば。
sunscreen?
うん。まあいや、それじゃなくて、その、なんか。
The moisture. No.
そう。
Yeah, I didn't. So the one mistake I made yesterday was that I didn't like ice my shoulders, like burned area. So that is why I have this red skin now. I should have done that, right?
そうだね。
Yeah.
まあというわけで、その日焼けの痛みを
Rest in peace.
治せる方法分かってる人。ぜひ。
シャカックスねの知ってんじゃない？
いやまあ知ってるかもしれないけど、私よりなんか茶色くない？
Yeah, right. But yeah, he runs 何ウルトラマラソンでしょ。
うん、多分アドバイスはあるはず。
Let me know.
ぜひ教えてください。And we're back with the final section. And if you made it to the final section, that means to send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a comment, question, language related, and or otherwise. And this week we have a follow-up, a response. And, you know, as a first-time commenter, I felt, I might as well give him the floor to actually have a response because, we had a long response to his initial comment. And this was Neutrino, who also thankfully clarified what neutrino was because I felt like I had some familiarity with the term. And that is where his comment starts by saying... Neutrino is a portmanteau of neurons, brain cells, and neutrinos, a particle that only weakly interacts with other matter but travel in large forms. Yeah, I remember that. I think in CS, neutrinos can actually mess up like circuitry. It's a whole thing.
素粒子だっけなんだっけそうだよね。
Yeah. And the rest of his comment. The point about diminishing returns. This is really mostly a thing once you reach a very, very high level, like probably 85+%, or in other words, when you are as fully functional in the language as you need. I can feel this in English as my second language. I'm probably 90% plus comfortable in English compared to my native language. I would make mistakes in both, but there's probably still larger gaps in English. I encounter new words just a bit more frequently, which is rarely, but I not really care to correct it or ever seek out to cover what I don't know yet, or frantically flashcard unknown words or whatever, lol. Especially since I can usually just infer the meaning from context or spend 2 seconds Googling. The learning will still naturally continue as long as I use the language, but I do not need to learn unknown words very often because the ones I don't know are rare. That's what's behind the concept of diminishing returns. You need a huge effort to fill in the last blanks, because they are so small and scattered you barely notice them. What I was thinking about was exactly things like pitch accent, which some Japanese learners put a lot of effort into achieving after a high level of fluency, just to pass as a native when ordering pizza on the phone. Of course, it's fine to do that, but it's also fine to not do that, confirmed by every Japanese friend I've asked. Like, yes, it's a thing, but it's also different in Japanese dialects, which apparently Fukushima people are not even really using it. And unless you're going to live in the country, I cannot see any practical effect of passing as a native. Personally, I wouldn't care if it has no effect. I'm fine knowing pitch accent exists and sometimes putting slight attention to hear it when listening, but I would far, far rather learn a new language and perfecting it. If I'd end up passing a native, it's not by intentional effort. Incidentally, maybe learning the tones in Mandarins might make you better at learning pitch accent, as I've heard Chinese. Gosh, this is just so long that it's hard to keep. I've heard tones in Mandarin make you. At least heard Chinese pick up pitch accent naturally, but I wouldn't know. Maybe being multilingual can in some cases lessen diminishing returns. Also, you pointed out another thing with Japanese. There's huge cultural barriers to communicating as a native, as well for many Westerners, especially if you are more direct in personality, which I am too, which probably came across in my original comment. I feel I can bring in my authentic personality in English, but I couldn't feel as authentic speaking with formality levels and being really vague and indirect the way Japanese communication is constructed. It's also the reason that I can read books in Japanese but struggle to speak, because my brain cannot comprehend yet why I need to differentiate between formal and informal language, so I keep mixing it all up. I've also never heard a Japanese person say Western people need to reach a level where they're almost surpassing native Japanese people, especially when N2 is good enough for most jobs and even N1 is still short of a full native vocabulary, let alone a full dictionary. The people who want to sound native do it for the art or identity of it, or just because they've grown up around on so much anime they end up that way without intent, which is cool. Or or I guess I've moved to Japan and lived here for a long time. And most Japanese learners seem similar in that way. They only want to learn Japanese out of passion for Japan, which makes sense because to decide to learn Japanese, you really need a specific passion for this specific language/culture and not just a general casual interest in learning a language, exactly due to how difficult it is. On the other hand, many polyglots actually seem to skip or struggle with Japanese because it is exceptionally hard, unless they've lived here like Steve Coffin. My original point was if learning Japanese is your only or main experience learning a foreign language as an American, it may seem kind of impossible to put so much effort into a lot of other languages. So if you don't have much experience with other languages, you might not realize that actually you can become competent in other languages far, far faster. You can start reading full books in many European languages and have conversations within a few months, or definitely within a year. I really admire people who have the courage to learn Japanese as their first, second language, because it's uphill by comparison. But like you guys also said before, many people know like 5+ languages and don't even consider it a big deal. I just think the performative and commercial exploitation of language learning, which I agree can be toxic, is just part of social media culture and in my view just as prevalent whether people are in bilingual or multilingual language learning community. Personally, I'm in between. I decided to learn Japanese for personal reasons and I appreciate that this is an exceptionally difficult language. Makes every other language seem easy, so easy. Whereas before, I found English first, but also languages like German, French, etc. super hard. I'm now open to learning languages that interest me, or any language that interests me. My apologies for reading your comment poorly, but thank you. I think that's probably the longest comment we've had on the podcast. As it was going, I'm like, oh, just but there are a lot of good points there. I'm not even entirely sure like where to jump in. I guess I will say about the N1 and N2 thing. Those
ね、なんか普通に私ちょっと知識不足かもしれないけど N1 のなんか語彙レベルを持ってる人はそこらの歩いてる日本人より語彙力あると思うんだけど。
Oh no, not N1. I mean maybe if you like aced N1 then maybe I'm just saying from my experience, from when I took the N1, my vocab is probably like multiples of what it's with N1, and I in some facets like I have a larger vocab than some people, but in terms of like there's like so much random vocab that whether it be like foods that you just never eat and you still never eat because you never encounter them. It's very weird. Like you end up with like the whole native comparison is so weird because it's like I think I mentioned before. It's like
なんかニュアンスも多いしね、日本語だと。
Yeah, but I'm saying like when vocabs, the whole being like a native thing. I've never ever, and I've listened to like anybody who could possibly think of, and I mean as well. The only people who speak native like Japanese are people who either are native Japanese or have the exposure of a native Japanese person, like they were moved there when they're 5. Like everybody else, there's even some.
それ English もそうでしょ?
No, I mean the thing is there's no such thing as like native English is so arbitrary. Like there's
それはまあいろんな国でさ話されてるしさ、なんかシングリッシュだっけ、なんかシンガポールの、あれもさ、まあ、英語っちゃ英語だけど英語じゃないっちゃ英語じゃないじゃん。
Yeah, or like in my opinion, I don't consider Italian. It's so like there's so many countries that from like just early education you're constantly filled on English, and I think it's almost arbitrary to distinguish from speaking at home or not, especially because of how many countries people listen to English everywhere. So like I almost feel like it's disingenuous to call like Italian English or something not I don't know, like when I hear an Italian speak English I'm like that's just English spoken by an Italian. I don't consider it not native English, especially when they're very high level. But with Japanese though, like I said, most Japanese people have a very shared experience, and because of the emperor everybody's learning Hyojungo. So I definitely think it makes you stick out. My point is though, basically if you don't have intrinsic reasons for wanting to improve, you're never fooling a native. I haven't seen like the only people I've seen are the ones who basically did the equivalent of just living there like when they were really young and then working for it or whatever. But like it's one of those things where you say one word that's different or one pronunciation and then it's like okay, you're not a native, so what at that point? Like okay, the game's up, the jig's
まあね。でも結構なんか日本人ってなんか日本語ネイティブじゃないっていうのになんか別に厳しくはない気がする。
No, that was another thing I want to talk about, which he's saying this something maybe I don't know if you intended to be this way, but I found it really weird. The notion, it might be been implied or probably wasn't intended, but this notion almost seeming like you were maybe if like I've also never heard a Japanese person say Western people need to reach a level where they are almost surpassing native Japanese people. Does that imply that if Japanese people said that, you'd feel like you need to do it? Because that reminds me of the French thing. This is one of the reasons, sorry, French listeners, if we have any French listeners. That's the thing I hear over and over and over again, and I'm just convinced it's true at this point, that French people are assholes when you're learning their language. If you use French, they're going to judge you, and they hold you to some arbitrary standard.
Je m'appelle Ayami.
And then learners feel like they have to reach it. Whereas Japanese people are so incredibly chill. Like I've never heard. They probably exist. I mean, you have one friend, I guess, who's like that. But even remember, who's like speak Japanese. But I don't think that person's concerned about the level.
なんかね、まあコンサバティブの人がいましてね、なんか日本来たなら日本語喋れみたいな言ってる人がいる。
Yeah, but I don't think that anybody's concerned about the Japanese people. It's like at most they're like, I just thought we want you to to use the language, but I've never heard anybody be like, you need to be a certain level or whatever.
でもさ、結構日本でそのコンサバティブな人のさ、まあ意見としてはなんか自分たち今日本人がまあ例えばアメリカ行った時にあっちは日本語で話してくれないじゃん。ね、英語で話してくるじゃん。だからうちらもその日本に来た外国人に対して日本語で話しておかしくないでしょみたいな感じで、なんでうちらが英語に適応しないといけないんだみたいな。
I think that logic is head ass. If I'm being honest, it's because let me tell you, English. Like, if you're in different parts of America, you guys, people speak whatever is spoken most commonly in that area. So there are places where Spanish is spoken more often. If you go to like smaller communities, you will get people speaking to you. If you're going to a place that is intended for Chinese people, I mean, like as in like they're frequenting, you're going to hear Chinese a lot. People speak whatever is most common in the area. If it's a place like, there are places like Minnesota and like there are a lot of states with specific like pockets of population regions. They just speak whatever people speak most often. And so if a lot of people are coming in and like know some other language, you're going to hear that. And also, more importantly, Japanese people learn English throughout their entire education system. No American learns Japanese naturally through
we do learn だけどさ like just on papers.
No, but I'm saying if you can identify that the thing you're hearing is even English, you're doing much better than the average American. Like there's no American, like, your friends can be like, oh, why don't you speak directly in Japanese? They're like, oh, I thought you were Chinese. That's what you're going to get. Like, and all you're going to get is that you're going to get this. In this person's ideal world, you go and you, konnichiwa, and the other person, the American goes, ching shang hua hua. And then they're like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, you're Chinese, right? I'm trying my best. I don't speak Chinese, but that's how you sound to me. You just get a bunch of racists coming back towards you. That's the idea. That's her ideal world. Because you're not going to get an old guy speaking Japanese. A lot of it. Konnichiwa. Hey. Let me see if there's because I know you had a lot there that I wanted to cover. Yeah, it's the brutal run.
Hurts.
Oh, I think I did mention this that before that the pitch accent is region dependent, and I have spoken to some friends who come from non-standard pitch accent places, and it was a very funny conversation where we both she was talking about I have to learn Hyojungo, but like where she was from, I don't remember what it was. It probably hard to be specify the person.
Oita.
Yeah. And I'm not sure what they speak, but are you familiar with it?
なんかあれじゃない多分結構なんとか弁とか多いよ。その例えば福岡だっけ？
Yeah, there's one that
博多弁。博多って福岡だよね。博多弁とか。
Isn't the one that doesn't use pitch accent?
ピッチアクセントじゃなくてもうねなんかね言葉が違う。
Yeah. Well, there's a whole different mix. So, like I said, blame the emperor. In my opinion, if the emperor didn't unify everybody in Hyojungo, this whole discussion about pitch accent would probably be way less important because there would be no standardization and it'd be very arbitrary. It'd be like, hey, do you like the Tokyo's Japanese? Do you like the, Fukuoka Japanese or the Kansai? I guess I will also mention that, like I said, once again, that the comparing yourself to a native is a very weird thing because I'm never going to have the experience of growing up around the same cultural things, the same foods and whatever, to have 100%, even like the most, like the people are, that I, on I don't know who they're most natural, even if not pronunciation, but let's say the most amount of vocab you can think of who are going in Japanese TV shows and stuff like that. I can guarantee you can make cultural references like that a Japanese kid would know, and they're gonna be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like whether it be like making random references to SpongeBob episodes in English or, you know, South Park or whatever. There are probably some really good Japanese speakers of English. I have like, hey, remember like, oh, remember this, like, you know, or like random like Chuck Norris or something. I dropped. Are you familiar with Chuck Norris?
Chuck Norris.
My point exactly. So I was saying like that's something that a lot of English speakers probably know what I'm talking about, like generational gaps, and it's so you're fighting this weird construction battle that like doesn't exist. Do you have any final thoughts on the topic?
まあなんだっけperfect 違うわ忘れた。まあパーフェクショニズムは良くないよっていう完璧主義は良くありませんよっていうお話だね。
Yeah, definitely same thing. Also, definitely enjoy the ride. I feel like if you're not, I'm assuming that's the same thing, especially if you're doing hobby language learning. Unless it seems like you're doing it to compete with other people. I really don't understand the point of getting too worried about it. Unless you have to do an interview, a job interview, as we established. And then you better be using Onsha and Kisha, because then your ass is getting hired.
Wish me luck.
That bell means we reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us, another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com. We might respond in the next episode. Also, consider supporting us on Ko-Fi to get video updates, Discord access, and or to just lend a hand. And finally, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
And Ayami.
Signing off.
Jane.
Also, I think Google Podcast is dying, so I might have to remove that.